Welcome again. Thank you. Thank you again via Al Gore's internet, my opportunity to spend a little time with you. I actually spent several months in Oklahoma about 20 years ago. I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I very much enjoyed my time living in Oklahoma while I was there. I spent a few Fridays in Bricktown. I understand Bricktown's still there. It's gotten a lot bigger since I was a resident in Oklahoma. And so I very much enjoyed living in Oklahoma. I didn't enjoy the Army stuff so much. I wish I could have done all that through Google Hangouts, but I did like being in Oklahoma. Now, it's hard, I think, to look at really kind of the mighty excess of higher education and not conclude that higher ed should be sort of, I think, ultimately cut off from taxpayer money just from efficiency standpoint, just from stewardship of money standpoint. If you're unaware of it, there's, I think, literally almost a race among colleges and universities to establish, for instance, water parks. So if you were to travel south from Oklahoma and you were going to go to Texas Tech University, you'd see they have a brand new water park. If you go to Missouri, University of Missouri, they have really the first water park I heard of at College University. It's called the Tiger Grotto. You can go online, find pictures of it. You can find pictures of students floating around on the lazy river with the palm trees in the background. And you can also find pictures of students at the sort of the side of the lazy river having people in Hawaiian shirts deliver their vitamin shakes and things like that. So knowing that all these things exist, there's clearly just too much money in higher education, and most of it comes from taxpayers. That's not really what I want to focus on today, even though that's reason enough to say we need to start removing taxpayer money from higher ed. It simply allows people to demand all sorts of things they probably wouldn't pay for on their own, and certainly have almost nothing to do with the quality of one's education. But there's really a more principled reason than just sort of the rampant waste, the non-completion. About 1 out of every 2, roughly, people who enter higher education will finish a program. It's a little higher than that, but roughly 1 out of 2. It's more than just non-completion. It's worse than credential inflation. About 1/3 of people with a bachelor's degree right now are in jobs that don't require that degree. And many jobs that require a degree, it's been shown, actually don't require any specific skills or anything you learned in college. In fact, the jobs used to be filled by people without degrees, and the jobs themselves haven't changed. It's just so many people get degrees, it's easy for an employer to ask for them because it's really no cost to the employer. So, but we're going beyond credential inflation. We're even going beyond the excessive sports. You can maybe look at Baylor, other schools that have been in trouble recently for sports, and even skyrocketing tuition. We know that tuition costs have risen great in excess of household income, even in excess of healthcare costs. But go beyond all those great reasons to get rid of taxpayer funding, which fuels all that waste and the price inflation and things like that. There's a more fundamental, a basic kind of American values reason for ending taxpayer subsidies to higher ed, especially directly to public colleges and universities. And that is, you cannot reconcile academic freedom with compelled support of colleges and universities by taxpayers. Now, of course, we want academic freedom. Academics and freedom is important. The way that we expand knowledge, we come up with new ideas, the way we innovate, the way society changes is people are able to explore things and say things and come to understand things that a lot of other people, maybe the majority of people, say this doesn't make any sense, this is crazy, I don't think this is right. If we always did what the majority wanted, we wouldn't be making much progress. So there's great reason for academic freedom. It's crucial for people to be able to explore new ideas and say things that are unpopular. Most important, beyond just all the benefits of academic freedom, is you absolutely don't want government saying, look, your line of inquiry, your ideas, these are okay. This line of inquiry, these ideas, no, not okay. We, the government, will say what sorts of things are okay to be studied, or at the very least, we'll put our thumb on the scale for one thing versus another. So you don't want government making these decisions. But on the flip side, and absolutely crucial, it is fundamentally unjust to compel a taxpayer to support the pursued ideas of the speech that they might find wrong. They may disagree with it. They may find it repugnant. Everybody has a right to free speech. They don't have a right to force other people to pay for it. So I don't, and government shouldn't have the right to take someone's microphone from them. By the same token, it would be totally unjust to say, but we're going to make these people pay for your microphone so that you can have speech. So we elevate your speech above everyone else's. I think that some of you may remember this. This kind of was best crystallized. You got to go back to the University of Colorado's. Does anybody remember Ward Churchill? Raise your hand if you remember Ward Churchill, because I can see you, so I know what's going on. Okay, yeah. So Ward Churchill, for those of you who don't know Ward Churchill, he had written an essay after 9/11 in which he infamously called people who died at the World Trade Center little Eichmanns. The point he was trying to make was that America had been sort of an imperial power, an empire imposing itself on people. And these people in the World Trade Center were all part of that. We kind of got what we deserved. Now, he wrote this, actually, it came to light not at University of Colorado, but at Hamilton College. He was going to go give a speech there, and people uncovered this, said, well, this is terrible. And what happened in Colorado was the governor himself said, look, we absolutely believe in academic freedom, but we cannot have taxpayers of Colorado support this sort of thing. Now, if you know what happened to Ward Churchill, there are all sorts of investigations, and ultimately he was fired, not directly because of the little Eichmann speech, but because people then looked into his academic work, and I think tried hard to find improprieties where that you could get rid of them for another reason. But it's quite clear that ultimately what this was driven by was people didn't like what he said in this essay. The point here is the University of Colorado and the state of Colorado was in a terrible position, an untenable position. Either you go after someone's academic freedom as the government, or you say, look, taxpayers, you have to pay for things and for work and expression that you find repugnant. You simply couldn't win that. Now, this has all come sort of again to the fore over the last maybe year or so, as we've seen sort of this upwelling of all sorts of movements and protests and demands for different policies at colleges around the country. So it's been parts of Black Lives Matter. It's been part of having spaces. The Melissa Click incident, of course, at the University of Missouri, going after reporters. We've seen, I think, very polarizing, actually many polarizing debates happening at institutions of higher education, at colleges and universities. Now, people in these debates, on the sides of the debate, probably think, look, we're right, the other side is wrong. But we have to, I think, first of all, approach this with some humility. Look, I think almost everything that I think is right. I mean, that's what my job is. I have to say I'm right all the time. But we all need to have humility and recognize maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're fallible human beings and we don't have all the answers. If that's the case, if we don't know 100% that we're always right, we should say, let people have their opinions. We'll debate them. But we should never say, well, this goes beyond the pale of what we can support. We'll have taxpayers support X, but not Y, because we're so sure that Y is wrong. More importantly, again, it is very dangerous to have government decide one side is right and one side is wrong. And so the mindset we often get is, no, it's fine to have forced taxpayer support. We'll just say that one thing is so absolutely wrong, that's where we cut it off. And I think what we often see is, you know, conservatives, it's often sort of portrayed as conservative versus liberal. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at higher education, if you look at the professoriate, if you look at the protests, it's clearly dominated by liberals. And so conservatives right now, in the immediate case, probably have the best argument to say, look, I don't want to support this. I don't think that my money should be going to these things. But the reality is, it would be just as unjust if we were to tell people, okay, now we are going to force your dollars to go to Hillsdale College or Grove City College or some other conservative college. At least part of the debate has to be moving away from the debate itself. You know, should you rename this building, or should we change our policies, to saying there's something more fundamental at stake here. we're compelling people, taxpayers, real human beings, to support activities they might find repugnant. And that is completely inappropriate and unacceptable in a society that is supposed to be free. And we never have that debate. We debate the issue at hand, but never the underlying system that's so unjust. And I think we need to recognize that. And so then the question is, how do we deal with this situation? I think the first step is you change how money goes to your public colleges and universities, because the most direct coercion of taxpayers, the most direct compelled support of speech, is forcing taxpayers directly to pay for an institution. It's better, it's more free if we say, instead of having that money go directly to an institution, we attach it to students. And we do this with Pell Grants at the federal level. At the state level, though, the norm has been to send most of the money directly to institutions. In Colorado, though, they tried to move away from that to some extent, saying we're going to attach, at least for undergraduates, we're going to attach the money to them, and they can take it to whatever school they choose. There are lots of regulations and changes to that, but the concept was the right one. At least now, whose speech gets supported is more a product of private decisions. But of course, this is not ideal. These are private decisions, but this is still money that comes from taxpayers. And there's a good chance that if you let students choose colleges, you still will not get an overall selection of schools and of speech that is what taxpayers would choose on their own, because students tend to be more liberal, and against schools and professors tend to be more liberal. So even better is, why not, instead of grants, make this money loans? And the reality is, loans are more fair for two reasons. One, and ultimately it's two major ways that are more fair. One reason, which is that the money is supposed to be repaid. It's not always, but you can write laws that say, we're not giving you easy forgiveness. You will repay this money. But the point is, the important thing is it's repaid. So ultimately, it's students with ultimately their own money deciding whose speech they're going to support. And not only is that more fair from just freedom, not compelling people to support speech they find repugnant often, but it's more fair because the big selling point for college is, if you graduate from college, you'll make, people often say, $1 million more over your lifetime than somebody who doesn't go to college. Now, those numbers are probably, that's sort of the high-end estimate. It's probably lower than that. But even the low-end estimate suggests you're going to make a pretty big profit over your lifetime from going to college and completing. It's very important you complete. We don't talk about that enough. But assuming somebody goes and they complete, it's unjust, not just from a free speech standpoint, but it's unjust to say, I am going to make a whole lot of extra money using your money and never make you, the person I got it from, whole. So for two reasons, we should say, no, we don't directly fund with free money people going to college. It's more just to make it loans. But even that involves some coercion. So people are not really given the choice, if they're government loans, whether or not they want to be a funder for that loan to begin with. Ultimately, the only free and fair way to do this is that you have funding based on people's free and voluntary decisions of who they want to support, people using their own money, people they borrow, or money they borrow from other people voluntarily. And then there's no coercion. There's no government thumb at all on the scale saying, well, let's make sure this money, just try and get it to colleges and universities. And the fact of the matter is, people will say, well, but how will the poor ever be able to afford college? But again, if it's true that there's this big earnings premium from going to college and completing, and that seems to be the case, there really is, then a lender stands to make a profit by working with even a low-income person who's truly demonstrated they're ready for college-level work and to pursue studies that give them skills that are in demand. Both sides would benefit, and we'd have the huge additional benefits of not compelling anyone to support speech, and of saying, look, make an efficient decision, because like I, as a lender, am not going to give you money, and you may not want to, more importantly, borrow money that covers not just education, but the biggest, world's biggest climbing wall and water parks and things like that. I think that in the end, this is really about justice. Academic freedom and public funding of colleges ultimately becomes a zero-sum game. If you have public funding of colleges, someone loses. Either you cut off someone's academic freedom because you say taxpayers shouldn't, but they should pay for other things, or taxpayers are compelled to support speech that they find repugnant. Having that as a fundamental tension and a constant violation of justice underlying a higher education system is wrong. And it doesn't matter where you stand on the myriad, debates that we're having in college right now. That simple tension in justice should be unacceptable. And that, for no other reason, is why we should move to funding where the money goes to students, not directly to students. Thanks, and I think that's time for questions.
Thank you, Neal. I'll start with one. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
What sort of policy mechanism, voucher, tax credit, tax cut, how specifically would we get there?
Well, I mean, I think that when I laid out kind of good, better, best, that would be a long-term way to get there. I think what you have to start doing is saying, look, we're going to essentially make the money that we send to the University of Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, other public institutions, a grant. Instead of budgeting for college, we say we're budgeting for students. And if they want to take it to University of Oklahoma, that's great. If they want to take Oklahoma State, that's great. If they want to go to University of Tulsa, that's great. It would then be more based in private decisions. But again, that's free money. I think you do have to have that transition where people first become accustomed to the idea of, I am the person who decides where this money is going. And it's not like this is a foreign concept, because of course we do have Pell Grants and we have loans and things like that now. So it's not like you're introducing a whole new idea. I think after that, you begin to transition to loans. I hope that people make this argument about it's fundamentally unjust that we're compelled to support speech we may find repugnance. Instead of saying, let's all engage in constant warfare over what we name buildings and things like that, let's at least leave taxpayers out of it. Don't make it something that they have to support a decision they may not like. That, I think, is a crucial argument to make. But there's also the fundamental fairness issue of, again, why should taxpayers foot the bill for someone else to ultimately earn a lot more money over their lifetime, and that person has no obligation to make those taxpayers, those real human beings, whole again? So I think you can then move to saying, look, we attach money to students, and now it should be loans. And then I think after that, you can continue to make the argument. This is, 10, 20 years. I mean, this is a long-term process. To say there's actually no good reason that government should be even supplying these loans. But this is all, all change is incremental. It has to happen, I think, sort of gradually, whether I like it or not. And so I think the first step is saying you make these grants instead of direct appropriations to colleges and universities.
Yeah, go for it. Hi. So my question is, would you say like making those grants directly to the students, or like making those grants directly to like the universities? So I didn't live in the state of Oklahoma when I came to school, and so would you say like the state of Texas, which is where I was from, they would make that grant to me and then I could decide where to spend that? Or like if I just don't go to a Texas institution, they just don't like owe me anything?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a number of different ways you could probably do it. I think the first thing that we would think of is, how do you direct money from residents of a state, to a school? I think the best thing is you say, look, we would spend, if you went to University of Oklahoma, we would spend, I don't know what the number is, we'll say $10,000 on a student. Now, of course, it'd be even better if you differentiate based on what they're studying like that. That gets pretty complicated. So say it's $10,000 a student. Ideally, you'd say, look, this money belongs to the student. Take it anywhere you want, at any school, in any state. But that's a tougher sell than, I think, saying, well, you have to use it in state. So from a point of kind of political reality, my guess would be the easier thing to do would be to say, you can take this money and you have to use it within the state. But I think ideally you say, take it anywhere. This is about educating the people of this state, not educating the people of this state necessarily in the state.
So really, it's just taking the money that's being subsidizing state education, following the student. But so essentially, the overall cost of education would rise, but then that money that's provided by the state would follow the student. So it really doesn't change the cost of what they'll have to make up. For instance, the cost of education for a student is $100,000, over their 5 years. So $50,000 of that is being subsidized by the state right now. So that's transparent to the student. But now that $50,000 would follow the student, they still have to make up the other $50,000 through the means that they're doing right now, right? Is that?
Yeah. So the idea, I think, and probably the easiest program to explain would be one in which a certain amount of money, but would be the same for everybody, would follow that student. Now, you could get more complicated and do great stuff with education savings accounts. Education savings accounts are really from kindergarten all the way through college. It's money the state account that you can use for lots of expenses in K through 12. You could use it for a private school tuition. You use it to buy a course. You could buy a curricula, or you can save it and use it for college. So there are actually great programs that go beyond higher ed. But if you're looking for a simple higher ed only program, I think the easiest way to start this would be to say, look, the state will spend $5,000, $10,000, whatever on the average in-state student. We're just going to give that to the students to take to the school that they want. And you may want to go a little below that. And part of the value of that is to say, look, we're actually saving money. The amount we would have spent, we're not even spending all that, but we're giving something of greater value because now the student can choose where this money goes.
Is there any state in which this program is in effect? You mentioned Colorado. How does it work in Colorado, and are there any other states that have somewhat of a similar type program?
Colorado is the only state I know of that explicitly says we are connecting the money to the student. Again, you'd have to look into, I don't remember the name of the program offhand, I should remember. Actually, I have something on my webpage at cato.org. It was an article I wrote in the Weekly Standard in December where you can find the name of it. I just don't remember it offhand. But it was sort of a hamstrung program because it was really the first of its kind. But it said, look, this money will go to institutions through students choosing those institutions. Now, I think it was less money if you chose a private college than if you chose a public college, and I think it was only in state, and it may have changed since it was passed. So you'd really need to look into what's still happening in Colorado. I think the program still exists. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of it, but go to Neal McCluskey's page at www.cato.org, and you'll see, I think it's listed as commentary, and it's a Weekly Standard article from December, and the title of the program is in there. And also, I should say, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, I know, has done some work on this idea, but I don't know how recently. And maybe OCPA has too.
Hello, I'd like to get your take on an interesting little Oklahoma program we have for low-income high school students. If they sign up, I think it's in the 9th or 10th grade, and I'm talking about Oklahoma Promise here, and your family makes less than about 50 grand, and you keep your grades up. That's the key to it. You have to make all A's and B's, I think, from the point at which you sign up. I think the state will give you enough money to, am I right, Brandon? Does that sound right? I see a nodding head back here. Yeah, okay, thank you. I've always thought that was a pretty good way, A, to keep kids in school who are really low income, B, keep their grades up, and C, give them a little leg up in college. But I'm eager to hear your views on it.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to handle funding college than just saying, look, we're going to send this money to an institution, and often institutions will take you regardless of what your grades are. I think it's good if you have a program that says, we're going to give you control of this money, and by the way, we're going to incentivize getting better grades through this program. I think that's good. Ultimately, that's not the ideal. mean, ultimately, we want people who are spending their own money. And the reason it's important to spend your own money is because we care most about how we spend money that we earned, or about money that people give us voluntarily because those people give it to us, or presumably are going to want to make sure it's used well. But it's certainly better that we have a system where we say, look, we're going to reward good performance, and part of the way we're going to do that is we're going to empower individuals to do what they think is best for themselves.